This is Daily Crypto News. I'm Sarah, and today I invited my great friend and fellow DeFi traveler, DaoChemist. Welcome to Daily Crypto News.
Hey, thanks for having me. Happy to be on the show.
Awesome. DaoChemist is full-time DeFi farmer and the host of Farmers Market, and it happens every week on Twitter Space, I guess X Space now, right?
Yeah, every Wednesday with my two co-hosts, we have Kiments, we have Lendex as well. So every Wednesday, 12 p.m. Eastern Time, we gather a panel of builders, thought leaders to talk about a topic in Web3 and DeFi.
Yeah, actually, it's pretty hardcore whenever I listen to it. They're all really at the forefront of DeFi, gets pretty technical as well. But I would love to introduce to DCN people if they are DGen enough to listen to it.
Yeah, we do try to make it as, I would say, non-tech friendly as possible. Because as to your point, right, like in DeFi, there's a lot of really technical things that are happening. And the builders sometimes are too busy to just, explain it to non-technical crowds. So we try to take really complex topic and break them down so that people understand why it matters, what projects are working on, and what's the vision for the future of it.
Yeah, true, true. Today, I'm going to pick your brain on DeFi and the status of DeFi right now. And I prepared some questions. Hope it's snappy enough, but focus on DeFi and your journey so that if anybody is looking to go into DeFi full time, it might be helpful. Okay, so number one, how would you see where DeFi is going in maybe a couple of keywords?
I love that question. I think, and I mentioned that before in other spaces, I think DeFi is getting to a place where when you look at most technologies, they get to a place where it becomes so complex that most people have a hard time to wrap their mind around it, right? If you look at your phone, your television, the car, maybe when it first got started, people could like fix their phone and fix their car and things like that, right? But now we are, most of us, when we deal with technology, we're the end users. So when DeFi started, it was very basic. It's kind of like the Aave Uniswap. You can swap tokens, you
Yeah.
can pay a loan. And then eventually people realized there's a way to make them more capital efficient, to do them cross-chain, to onboard all kinds of different assets. So I think DeFi is getting to a place where it's getting sophisticated and almost to a place that I would call enterprise ready, where it's no longer just about a bunch of DGen kind of trading between each other, a bunch of tokens, but it can actually now be a tool for a financial institution, a corporation, enterprise to say all those things that people are building DeFi, those financial primitives, they can actually be better, faster, more efficient, more transparent than regular finance. So we're trying to get a loan. We're trying to express or represent some kind of financial primitives. DeFi is actually, in many cases now, a better way to do so. There's still a lot of limitation in terms of regulation.
Right.
The UI is not great, right? There's a lot of issues, but I think it's getting at the place where we're going to start to hear stories about actual adoption of DeFi and not just people gambling and trading tokens.
Yeah, I mean, I heard some traditional finance liquidity providers, they actually put their front end, which is slick and nice, and that is very comfortable for its TradFi users, and then in the back end, they actually kind of plugged DeFi applications so that they can provide liquidity and then enjoy the derivatives on DeFi. So at the end of the day, maybe I think that this whole discussion about user adoption is getting slow because our like interface is not so friendly might kind of die as well, because at the end of the day, if you can put money in and it works, it's safe enough, then I mean, who cares about interface? Some apps are
Hmm.
pretty crappy, so as long as it works, I think it would be also okay. And most of the DeFi applications now that survived long enough has a pretty decent function and history of it, right?
That's a great insight. I don't think that awareness is that share let's say on crypto Twitter or crypto X, where a lot of people don't see what you say, which is a lot of DeFi is around protocols,
Yeah.
and those protocols don't necessarily need to have an application that is also, I would say, representative of the DeFi ethos, right? So
Mm-hmm.
what you say is true. Like you can have financial institution that see the protocols of lending, trading, maybe using stable coins,
Mm-hmm.
and be able to build on top of them. And it doesn't necessarily translate to millions of people on Twitter or Instagram onboarding into quote unquote crypto or DeFi.
Yeah.
It could be that it's just like a back end technology that is very powerful, but it just becomes like a database or another tool, but not necessarily a completely different ecosystem. So I think that's definitely a conversation there.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that there's going to be two types of adoption. There will be more, I would say, applications that are built on top of DeFi and
Yeah.
that will have more of a decentralized ethos to them.
Mm-hmm.
But it just takes time to build them, and it's harder to build, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
usually,
Yeah.
like Web two have like a moat, they have integration points that are not necessarily super friendly to Web three. The regulators are not super friendly to Web three, and then for the most part, the developers are focusing on the protocol and not the UX. And now we're starting to see things like account abstraction, where your wallet might be as easy to use as a Web two wallet, or
Yeah.
maybe it
Yeah.
can be abstracted away. It can be just connected to another existing account that you have. So I think you're right. Like the adoption that matters is more on the back end,
Mm-hmm.
but I do think that we will see as well in the onboarding of regular users. They might not know how it works, but it'll be based on DeFi and decentralized technologies.
Yeah, yeah. I think that is the most plausible scenario I could think of. Instead of like really trying to convince people to understand DeFi and appreciate the philosophy of DeFi and everything and really on board, but as long as it works in their daily life somehow, it would work. But in terms of, you mentioned about regulations and other difficulties in DeFi, but what do you think we're actually missing in terms of moving forward with this DeFi?
I am super bullish. I don't think I've been in space for a while, but I don't think I've been so bullish about the space where it's going than since the end of 2023,
Yeah.
where I think that what was missing for a long time was use cases that will illustrate the power of DeFi. For the
Mm-hmm.
most part, like DeFi has been almost like a casino, and then people are able to gamble on their favorite token, and the token has a narrative of something that will happen in the future.
Right.
But I think, especially coming from like the enterprise world, like you start to think, well, cool, that might sound like a cool pilot for someone to play with, that we have some innovative technology that will happen in a few years from now. But there's a big difference between a pilot for the R&D team to a CTO of a big bank or of a big corporation saying, we need to use this because there's no other way to resolve the issue that we're facing.
Right.
And
Right.
so I from what I'm seeing, I think there's not much missing to DeFi to get adopted. It's just a matter of what we call like the business cycle of
Yeah.
those ideas already in place. One example out of many, there was a project called I think Marianne or Project Mariana,
Hmm.
which is different central bankers looking for ways to basically exchange their CBDCs or their fiat currencies, right?
Yeah.
So it was between Singapore, Switzerland, and maybe France, I think.
Yeah.
And what they were using was a fork of Curve,
Yeah.
a DEX protocol. They were using ERC20 token,
Mm-hmm.
and the report was suggesting massive gains in speed and efficiency, reduced cost, and you start to see like the gains are there. The
Mm-hmm.
benefits for a corporation or for institutions working together are clear, right? And that's just
Mm-hmm.
one of many examples.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think what was missing to DeFi is just those inroads with the enterprise world. And then to your point, I think the adoption is first is going to happen in the back end,
Mm-hmm.
where most of us are not necessarily going to be aware of, but it's
Yeah.
going to be, hey, Oracle is now integrating with a lending protocol, or Microsoft is leveraging this ID system And unfortunately, that's not going to necessarily ring a bell to a lot of crypto people.
Yeah.
But I think it's just a matter of, in my opinion, right? This is me predicting, right? I'm probably going to be wrong, but
Sure.
I think by the end of this year, we'll see massive use cases that illustrate that DeFi is actually ready.
I kind of agree, and of course, like being inside of crypto, I would always want to be super bullish and keep the momentum going and positive vibe only. But I also can't stop thinking about the fact that there was this article after ETF was approved. It's a good news. Like there is enterprise money coming in. More and more people will know about Bitcoin, invest in Bitcoin, which will eventually, like, awareness will help the industry. But then at the end, this article mentioned that in fact, they are not there. These ETFs has nothing to do with blockchain. These ETF will not be on chain ever. It will not push the number of validators or the actual improvement of the technology whatsoever. It's just outside the actual crypto world. So do are we ready to accept this reality where, okay, we push this concept of decentralized money, and then now they as in like non-crypto people take this away from us, and there is no decentralization appreciated anymore, and this philosophy of Bitcoin will be kind of tainted in a way, like it will never be remembered.
Yeah,
Do you, how do you approach this kind of a
I think that's
yeah,
a great
perspective?
question because it allowed to really illustrate like two different things that are happening that sometimes can be confused. Is on one hand, there are TradFi interests into maybe onboarding the assets of crypto, Bitcoin,
Yeah.
Ethereum, maybe stable coins and other things into the existing infrastructure, right? The ETFs or
Mhm.
funds and things of that nature. And to your point, I agree. If that's the only story that we have for crypto is that, oh, well, TradFi is now excited about Bitcoin, the asset, or Ethereum, the asset. It's not great. It's like, okay, it's cool. It
Mm.
maybe give us a sense of validation.
Yeah.
I think the best way to frame that aspect of it would be to say, okay, well now we're going to have more friendly conversation around crypto from Bloomberg and CNN and regular TradFi, right?
We'll get Google ad back.
Exactly, right. So that's not a non-significant part of the
Yeah.
cycle of adoption. But
Mhm.
I agree with you. That's not the adoption that matters, right? The adoption that matters is not TradFi onboarding assets,
Mhm.
crypto. The real onboarding is when TradFi start to use and leverage the networks, right?
Yeah.
Like, I guess the difference would be, are they looking at those primitives, and we can expand outside of DeFi? It could just be decentralized architecture, and seeing benefits. And I
Mhm.
think that adoption, unfortunately, is not going to be as easy to communicate than saying JP Morgan is buying certain asset.
Yeah.
I think that adoption is a bit more technical,
Mhm.
and but there are already some really great places to be excited for. I know that right now people, for example, talk about AI a lot,
Yeah.
and really is excitement. I think ChatGPT was the most popular app in terms of adoption. It was the fastest
Right.
amount of users in a short amount of
Mhm.
time. But then the real question begins at, well, okay, well, we like AI, but how do we make sure that the data that AI is ingesting hasn't been tampered with? How do we
Mhm.
make sure that the model that is feeding us this information has been tampered with? Well,
Mhm.
we probably want to have a way to verify and to register that it hasn't been tampered with. And the easiest way, the cheapest way, the most transparent way is to use zero knowledge proofs and validation and to put this proof on chain, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
There's a lot of specific use cases that the moment we start to look at that side of the adoption, there are stories. They may not be like the headline grabbing type of stories,
Yeah.
but they point to DeFi being needed,
Mhm.
decentralized technology being needed, and there's not a lot of other ways to solve those problems. So
Mhm. Mhm.
I think that's going to become in the other side of the adoption, right? And to your
Hmm.
point, right now the story is really on the asset and the price going up, and I think that's cool. But the real adoption, I think, is happening, but it's just happening behind closed door.
Mm. It's very hard to predict the market in that way. It's like the technology part improves along, but there is also this like financial part that is also important to for us to be kind of noticed, that we can't really avoid. And probably, I don't know, not probably, but maybe like 90% of the people are involved in this financial part of it as well, so it's really hard to appreciate which one is actually what matters. But in your opinion, if we were to use cryptocurrency in daily life, maybe through DeFi apps or not, what would be the use case that you think you'll see?
Yeah, that's a tough one because I think it's hard to wear different hats at the same time.
Yeah.
Because when we're DeFi, usually we're users and investors,
Mm-hmm.
and so we start to get a little. Well, I do at least, and I think a lot of people do as well. Where hey, I'm on team this dex as opposed to this other dex, right?
Yeah.
Like I think this desk, decentralized exchange has a better model and is going to grow, or this chain has a better infrastructure and is going to grow faster than this other chain. And so I put my investor hat, but then the reality is how I use things. I
Yeah.
don't really care which dex I'm using as long as I'm getting the better price. So
True. I mean,
sometimes it's
there is this the kind of future I imagine where I can use cryptocurrency in daily life is like I have this card that has whatever cryptocurrency in it, and then I can use it to buy stuff.
okay.
And there, where I'm living right now in Budapest, there is a Bitcoin bar, and supposedly you can pay your beer with Bitcoin. But I didn't even dare to go in there because I could imagine the scenario where I'm just so awkward for the approval to go, and there's a transaction ID I have to provide, like all these things, just so it's just
Yeah.
so awkward. It's not like just swipe and go.
Yeah. If we would say today, what is the state of the adoption of applications?
Hmm.
They're not there. It's just not there.
Yeah.
They're just really bad user interface.
Yeah.
And compared to the service that people take for granted, like what is Venmo, PayPal, what have you,
Right.
it's just so integrated into the banking ecosystem. We have KYC,
Hmm.
protection. There's an entire infrastructure all around it. So that when you look at,
Right.
yeah, to your point, like an app that say, hey, you can scan and pay with your Bitcoin or some other things.
Yeah.
They're definitely like progress, right? I think that there are cards that you can use to pay, but I don't think that's the apps that are necessarily going to be the most widely used. I don't think it's about
Mm.
necessarily like payment or things like that.
Mm.
I think stable coins are the perfect use case when it comes to crypto. And I know that it's not
Yeah.
necessarily the most decentralized aspect of it because for the most
Hmm.
part it's USDC and
Yeah.
Tether. But if I'm based in Colombia, and most Latin American countries have a bad history with maintaining a strong currency. They're very volatile. They go up and down, and so people
Hmm.
have this mindset of my currency is not that strong,
Yeah.
and if I had access to any other currency to store the value of my work,
Yeah.
I would use that. So I know that for other people, it might not make a lot of sense to say, "Hey, I'm in crypto just to hold stable coins," but for a
Right.
lot of people around the world, that's a massive use case.
It is.
And
It is.
the ability for you to just have that and not ask permission, not have to go through a bunch of regulation to get access to that
Hmm.
asset, that's one massive first step. And then you can start to think, okay, well, if I have access to stablecoin, can I also potentially now use it to provide collateral
Hmm.
to another person around the world that needs it for a loan?
Yeah.
And that use case, similarly to the one about like trying to fight volatility in your local country,
Hmm.
a lot of small and medium enterprises around the world have a really hard time getting access to credit. Like
Yeah.
it's trillions of dollars of missed opportunities that
Mm-hmm.
if you were a farmer, if you were a small startup in Nigeria, somewhere around the world, you just don't have access to credit. Or if you have
Yeah.
access to it, it's like at a high interest rate.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of a sudden, you can start to see where organically and progressively, as we onboard more people and more liquidity from the real world, you start to see those use cases building on top of each other. Where first it's just about, I just want to store my value
Yeah.
in another currency. Maybe it's gold, maybe it's Bitcoin, maybe it's a stable coin.
Yeah.
Once you have it there, there's a bunch of services where you can now provide liquidity and
Yes.
and help the economy of the world. Or maybe you need a loan and you have this collateral that now people recognize, and
Mm-hmm.
you can start to build this entire financial ecosystem.
Mm.
I don't know if that's going to happen right away. I think that's going to happen organically. Maybe some countries are going to be faster than others. I think Brazil, Argentina, probably countries that will
Yes.
be merging fintech and DeFi together, and that's I think that's
Yeah.
going to be really really powerful narratives.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more in that use case because whenever people try to argue against cryptocurrency, we always have the stablecoin to say, okay, there are actually literally unbanked people, and there is no way for them to have any format of storage, value storage medium, and cryptocurrency can do that, and that's brilliant. But if I may ask you, why are you here in cryptocurrency? I know it's a big question, but I after these couple of years, I feel like I've lived my whole life again in this crypto market and
Yeah.
just really went up and really, really, really down, right? So these days I think about this question a lot.
How long have you been in the crypto space, Morris?
Oh, I started in and out, just kind of a part-time freelancer thing since 18.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I feel like those are dog years where like it might feel like it's only been like 6 7 years, but it probably feels like it's been like 50 years. And
Yeah.
you've
Yeah.
seen like the ups and downs. You've been through rugs, and I think most of us
Exactly.
in crypto feel the same way, where
Yeah.
every year feels like 7 years or more, right?
Right, right.
I joined because I thought this was a really innovative space. I was an engineer before,
Mm-hmm.
doing mostly front end, but also just general interest, back end stuff like that.
Yeah.
And my job was good, but I wasn't necessarily like a huge fan of what I was doing. It felt like I was not gaming the system at a high salary, and I was building dApps.
Mm,
But I didn't really see like the real value. I felt like, okay, cool. I'm building some application on mobile
mm,
for a few people, but it didn't really feel like a calling. It felt more like just a salary. I'm
mm.
providing value to this company. And so when I heard about crypto, it was just really a friend trading and making a lot of money. I think it was around the end of 2016, early 2017, where like
Yeah.
the graph of Bitcoin was up, the graph of ETH was up, and every week it would tell me about those massive gains. And I thought
Yeah.
maybe I should take a look at that. I didn't quite get Bitcoin, Litecoin, all that stuff.
Oh
But funny
yeah.
enough, it was
Litecoin,
Cardano that
same.
this Charles Hoskinson with his like whiteboard session and explaining the that you could use this blockchain to build application without having those middlemen and those walled gardens. And
Yeah.
if you're an iOS developer, that resonate to you a lot because you have to
Mm.
deal with the App Store. Every time I submit a
Oh.
an app, the App Store say, we don't like this. We don't like that.
Oh.
You have to pay us
Yes, yes.
30%. You have to renew your
Of
license
course.
every year. You have to buy this new tool, this new plug, and you have to try it on the simulator, but it doesn't work. So you have to buy all the phones and all the iPads just to make sure that it works. And it was like, it felt frustrated.
Mm.
And there's a lot of those similar experiences that people have, even outside of building iPhone
Right.
apps. And just in general, if you work in healthcare, there are gatekeepers where you're trying to provide a better experience to users. You just don't have access to the APIs. There's
Mm-hmm.
those like companies that have this moat, and they can close the door to any innovation. And I think that's true in the banking system as well, where hey, I can provide a really cool application if the banks were to open the APIs and the banks
Yeah.
would say no.
Mm-hmm.
So as a developer, I thought, wow, if you could remove all the permission and just create, sure, you introduce more risk, but
Yeah.
you introduce way more innovation.
Yeah, it's
And
really liberating.
yeah, yeah. And that's the thing. Like, I think Charles is really great at explaining those things. It's like the teacher ethos to him, where he's really good
Yeah,
at
yeah.
explaining things. And if you're a developer, it's like, oh my God, like that's the guy. So it's called
Yeah.
that that gets me in the space. But I think what keeps me there is I do think that there is, and this is my personal views, right? Like I
Mm,
don't think a lot of people
of
share my
course.
views in the space, but I remember like watching Wall Street's the original one, not the one
Mm,
with Shia LaBeouf, the one with Michael Douglas from the '80s,
mm,
and his line where he say greed is good,
yeah.
and he's supposed to be the bad guy, so they frame him as a bad
Mm-hmm.
guy, but he says a lot of truth during the movie.
Yeah.
And I think what's great about crypto is a lot of times when we're trying to quote unquote change the world, we have to embrace a very altruistic point of view, right? I'm doing this
Mm-hmm.
for others. I'm not doing this for myself. I
Yeah.
think crypto resolved the greed is bad on one side, and I have to be altruist on the other side, where it says it's not that greed is bad,
Mm,
it's that greed in the zero sum game where for me to win, somebody else has to lose. That's bad because
mm-hmm.
obviously our incentives are completely misaligned, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think the general gist, the inside of crypto is to say, if I can align your greed with my greed, where we're all adding our value to the same ecosystem,
Yeah.
then all of a sudden we're not playing a zero sum game, we're playing a positive sum game where we're collaborating, we're innovating, and then we're creating more values. So
Mm,
you winning, another person winning means that I'm winning. And
yeah.
so all of a sudden, if we wanted a better world, right? And we
Mm,
have two options. One is to be altruist and remove our desire for things. And
yeah.
another one is to say, no, actually, you should go for all the things that you want, but just align your motives with other people.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden, I think there's a potentially better economy. And I think crypto
Mm,
is not necessarily through its ideology, but just through the incentives that it's creating. I
yeah.
think it's actually materializing that vision where people can play
Mm,
positive sum game, where the investors, the builders, the users can actually be aligned, and it's not that the investors are exploiting the users or the developers or pitted against another group of actors.
right, right. I I would like to say it's beautiful, really, but on the other side, it is a very practical world where all of our interests are somehow met well enough to kind of function as a community without thinking that okay, this is immoral or I'm just only doing this for myself. But in fact, I'm doing this for myself, but it's kind of helping and creating a positive feedback loop. Um, Maybe I'm too idealistic. I wish
No,
everybody has a really good will.
I think like most of society works, right? I don't think there's like a fundamental dysfunctioning, right?
Yeah.
But I do think that the insider crypto came from, at least in part, right? I'm sure like the
Mm.
cyberpunk will say no, it traced from way before that. But like in 2008, a lot of people, especially in the West, realized that when the TradFi or the financial institutions who make insane amount of money, right?
Mm-hmm.
When they drop the ball and they lose money, their loss are subsidized by average people, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there was no sense of justice in the sense of like they just get to be bailed out by people taxes and
Mm-hmm.
continue playing and gambling. And so I think a lot of people realize that, oh, there's a two-tier system where some people play by certain rules and other people play by different rules, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that happens all the time everywhere in finance. I don't think there's like a fundamental dysfunctioning of finance, but the moment you become aware of that, it just feels unfair. And I think that unfairness onboarding a lot of people into crypto and
Mm.
cyberpunk ideology.
Yeah,
And I think there's a potential for crypto to just improve on the existing financial ecosystem, right? Where
definitely.
there could be greater transparency And I think just a sense of fairness, right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
I would say, would you talk about like a lot of people are unbanked or don't have access to financial services.
Mm-hmm.
I think the moment we start to think globally, then those issues magnify even more. So that
Yeah.
if you're someone in the third world, a lot of people don't have any access to financial services.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a company in the third world, a lot of people have zero access to any financial services. And
Yeah.
so if you want to usher a greater growth everywhere around the world, then having a fairer system that's permissionless that give access to everyone,
Mm.
that's started to become more of a greater need, right? But
Yeah.
if we're just focusing on maybe, let's say, more or less functioning liberal capitalist societies, I don't think there's like this needed urgent need to fix it, right? Like my bank account works, my
Mm-hmm.
PayPal works. I don't feel like I'm missing certain financial services.
Yeah.
So I think both are true, right? I think there is a potential to improve, and maybe as we onboard more people in global financials,
Mm.
we kind of need to provide those fair system. And outside of crypto, there's things like BRICS, for example, that express the
Mm.
same desire for a more decentralized financial infrastructure that's not dominated by one actor or a specific group of actors.
Mm-hmm. I couldn't agree more on that part where you said about just giving this fairness feeling to people. I think I would like to describe the giving that ownership back, because the society has the humankind society has developed so fast and quick that some people didn't even see how that happened, but like as you're born you just don't have any ownership to your finance.
Yeah.
But we are already so equipped in the society where every system is built with all the permissions and the centralized system, and there is no way whatsoever you can change that system unless you I don't know, burn the world down. So in that sense, I think it's very small kind of feeling of liberation that you can actually have control of your finance, but it's a big deal. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
But I
yeah,
think you're right on the sense that if you're an end user, you don't necessarily care to understand technology, and
mm,
certainly you probably don't care about the ideology, right?
yeah,
And I think that's where we have to come to peace a little bit in crypto, which is like
yep,
there's a lot of ideology, like especially from like the older crowd, right? Like the cyberpunks and
yeah,
the libertarians, right? Like, oh my God, we
yeah,
have to like revolutionize and take
yeah.
down the fiat world, and that's not the actual reality of adoption, right? So
No,
I think
yeah,
most users are not going to care. They just see cheaper
true.
transactions, and I think even that is a good value proposition, right? If
Mm,
I do a transfer right now to my bank account to someone around the world, it takes 3 days. It costs me $40, but it's the same technology as an email. Why
yeah,
shouldn't it be instantaneous and really cheap?
right, right, true, true. Okay, I know we're getting a little bit heavy, but I would like to ask you what's your 2024 plan and wrap it up.
Yeah, I think since I've been in the space, I never really had like a super maxi point of view, right? Like, and
Mm,
I don't think of myself a maxi, but a lot of people will look at me as a maxi and say, "You're an Eve maxi." Only thing you look at is Eve,
yeah.
and I like a lot of ecosystem. I like Polkadot. I think they do some really interesting work.
Huh.
Even Ripple, I'm not super familiar with what they do, but I think that
Mm-hmm.
if they can indeed onboard like financial institutions and central banks, I think
Yeah.
that's great.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think 2024, in my opinion, you would be you would make a mistake if you don't at least keep an eye on the Ethereum ecosystem, because
Mm,
I think the technology that people are working on, it may sound a bit technical, people may not care about it, but the developers do,
yeah.
and that's the adoption that matters. I would
Yeah.
say if you can get the developers on board, from not just the Web3 developers, but developers in general,
Mm-hmm.
that's who creates the innovation. That's who onboard the users, and then with more users, you onboard more developers. You create like this, like really nice positive reinforcement.
Mm-hmm.
I would say there's eigenlayer for restaking, which is
Yep.
If you provide security to Ethereum, you can run your own validator, or you can like partake in the cluster validation.
Mm-hmm.
Get a real nice reward to provide security.
Mm-hmm.
And rich staking use this community or ecosystem of staking to reuse it for other purposes. So if you think about an Oracle like Chainlink, or providing other services around the ecosystem of blockchains,
Mm-hmm.
sequencers, could be data availability layers, and but just in general, could be other blockchain. You can reuse that same security to secure other services, and that means that the stakers are going to get paid more because the services will pay them. But it
Mm-hmm.
also means that it's a lot easier to create new services without having to like onboard your own ecosystem of validators. So
Yeah.
the gains of safety are going to be really great, and we're going to see a lot of use cases that didn't make sense before now being spin up in a matter of weeks, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think
Mm-hmm.
that's one massive innovation. The second one has been around for years is rollups. I think rollups are going to be there's going to be 50 different rollups, maybe hundreds of rollups, and in a few
Wow.
years, it'll be thousands of rollups.
Yeah.
And if a lot of people say, well, why do we care about rollups, or why should we have so many? Like, isn't it going to fragment the entire ecosystem? I would say that actually no, because you want a easy way to onboard enterprise. And
Mm-hmm.
if you're CTO for a financial institution, any type of institution, the ability for you to spin up a roll up without having to create your own blockchain,
Yeah.
and you can customize how you spin it up. You can have KYC on top of it. You can have your own sequencer or how you order transactions. You can literally just a bunch of check boxes. You
Mm-hmm.
set up your roll up, and within 5 minutes, it's up and ready to work. That's going to be a really great tool to onboard them into the public ecosystem of crypto and not the private ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
And I could go on. There's a lot of really cool technologies that are happening.
Yeah.
Some of it sounds a bit boring and nerdy, but if you take the time to learn and just think about who will use it and how
Mm.
developers will create, for me, it's like if it's not 2024, and I might be wrong, right? Things take longer than we expect.
Yeah.
I'll be surprised if we don't see some major surprise and mass use cases by the end of this year.
Okay. Okay. So we're gonna keep the bull market going until the end of the year, or
Could
possibly.
be, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Cool. Where can our listeners find you? Whatever projects that you're working on.
Sure. I'm on Twitter at as DaoChemist. So my favorite book when I was a kid was The Alchemist, and
Mm.
the first product I worked for was DAO Stack, or the first project in crypto, and it was
Uh-huh.
basically like this protocol to build your own DAO. So I kind of combined the two. So DaoChemist, DAO, and then Chemist.
Okay.
Uh, DaoChemist on Twitter. You can reach out to me as well as DaoChemist on Telegram. With my co-host Kmens and Lendex every Wednesday, we have Farmers Market. And I think we have a few more things coming up for 2024, but I'll reserve that
Ooh.
for later on.
Okay. Okay. Maybe when we have that, I can have you again here in DCN.
Yeah, this was fun. I think you asked a lot of really important question that help clear out maybe not the confusion, but so sometimes the lack of clarity that we have in the space when we talk about
Yeah.
ideology versus pragmatic adoption in the space. And I think it's important for the user or the investor to understand the differences.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope all the listeners also enjoyed it. Thank you so much, DaoChemist, coming here today.
Thank you, Sarah. It was a pleasure.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. We'll come back tomorrow with a different episode, and happy hodling, everyone. Bye bye.
Bye, guys.